Your own. And as I talked about, growing marijuana helps me relax, it makes me feel great. And it's a big point to me is, why buy when you can grow your own? This is a mango plant that we grew on that balcony. Unfortunately, I just started growing again now that I'm legal, and there's no new photos to show you of beautiful budding plants. But that's a mango. That's the first week of flower on a balcony. The leaves were bigger than my hand. You can, from that balcony grow. That's what you can get away with on a balcony in the city of Toronto. If you were to make your balcony green friendly and get rid of all that concrete and just put green plants in that, which is what we did. This is the result. That's 1 week into flower. And we didn't get to finish these plants because we got busted. That's the early Wandering Stone collection. Again, I put the photo the wrong way, but you can see the up in smoke sign sort of up that way. But that was also on that balcony. Where's that sign now?
Is that vapor?
Is that vapor still in the back somewhere?
Yeah.
One day we should just start putting it out on the street for a couple days as a joke.
There's a prohibition on
Yeah, the street can't put them on.
Even better, we'll fight that prohibition. You can do it, I believe in you. But this is like the sign, like, this is what they busted me over. These are the plants. And I ended up, because I made the foolish mistake, I might have got away with it and been out of jail right away for growing marijuana on my balcony. Unfortunately, I had already promised the court a couple months earlier I wasn't going to grow marijuana.
You didn't forget about that.
I did not forget about it. In fact, that came out and bit me right in the ass. I spent 13 days in the Don jail. My cellmate was a rapist, convicted multiple times, and spent the night making cartoons. That was what his hobby was. And on my birthday, 420-month birthday, which by the way is 35 if anybody hasn't celebrated their 35th birthday.
Damn, I already missed that one.
Yeah, you got to tuck it in and remember, 35 equals 420 months. So if you think at the 35 age, what's a good birthday to celebrate? That is indeed the one to be celebrating. It's the 420-month birthday. So this rapist convict guy who is going back to court for yet another rape conviction, it made me a birthday card. And I still have the birthday card. And it's up on my wall. It's still something I'm like, as a memory of the Don jail, I will keep this birthday card as an effort not to get there again. So the Don jail is a human rights violation according to the UN. It's located in an NDP riding and has for several years. And it is actually an old-fashioned dungeon. And it has a historical designation. And occasionally for open Toronto, with doors open and they let people see these excellent historical monuments and stuff, they will open up part of the Don jail for you to go like take a tour, but not where the convicts reside. So when you get evicted in the province of Ontario, the McGuinty government under the Liberals, I guess, McGuinty under Liberals sounds about right, you lose all your stuff and they will evict you. In 7 days, you can get evicted for growing marijuana. In 7 days, and not be found even guilty of the crime. So while you're in jail, you can get evicted and go home and you can lose everything you own. But they can get you. So if you're growing marijuana in an apartment, you can get really screwed. You can get evicted. And I was evicted twice that summer. So technically, I guess I was evicted illegally because I was never found guilty of a crime. So they have a law. You can be evicted and found guilty of it. And before you're even found guilty of growing marijuana, you can get evicted. So a couple months later, all my charges in Toronto were mysteriously withdrawn. They went from like trying to keep me in jail on a $40,000 bond, and to then they just sort of withdrew everything. They were like, hey, yeah, good job. We're just going to withdraw all your charges and for your co-accused Eric Hampson. Chris Goodwin's charges, which we didn't know about until last year, so they kept him in the system for 2.5 years, ran into him on numerous occasions, decided that he had a warrant for his arrest for that balcony grow. He spent the night in jail, so I guess he was a co-accused on that one. But my charges were completely withdrawn after like 2 court of appearances. And had I'd gone to Vancouver after that, I probably wouldn't have moved back. But all my charges in Toronto were mysteriously withdrawn. So I'm thinking, all right, they're going to withdraw the Niagara charge of 1 count growing marijuana for me. Nope. They opted to proceed on that charge, growing marijuana for me, which the conservative government is trying to get rid of in their new bill, omnibus bill, crime bill. You can no longer just be growing for you. And it's a rare charge to get growing for yourself. It's a charge you can actually take to a jury. So this is the charge that just kept going and going and going. One count of growing for myself in Niagara. There's Bubba Kush. So we had a pre-trial. The pre-trial lasted 18 months. I kid you not. We spent a year fighting Health Canada because they refused to come to court when we subpoenaed the director of Health Canada. They used, and wait for it women, they used the Rape Victim Act. So see the connections here? They used the Rape Victim Act and said, Mr. Mernagh and his lawyer Paul Lewin are trying to impugn our wonderful, wonderful reputation, like rapists do to their victims. That's what they said. You're like, oh my God, I'm a rapist now? Like, Health Canada came to court and said, like, we don't have to testify because the Rape Victim Act protects us. Well, that would be correct if I raped the director of Health Canada instead of just asked for information. So they spent a year, literally, we went to court and they argued this in what's called the sidebar, like, should Health Canada testify or not by protecting themselves with the Rape Victim Act. The best part is you go in to have this sidebar argument for a day, and both sides, before they both go to court, whatever way the judge rules, we'll see you in the appeal court. So, you're looking at a lengthy fight. The judge agreed with our side, wrote a 10-page ruling that said the federal government should not be able to hide behind the Rape Victim Act because that's what it was never intended to do. The government can't hide behind the Rape Victim Act. And why? Well, when Health Canada finally did testify, instead of sitting them in the courtroom, we sent them letters. We would send them, hey, how much money do you spend on advertising? And they would come back and say, well, we don't really understand that question. We would rephrase it and say, how much money in your budget have you spent on advertising? And then they would come back and say, well, the budgetary total for blah, blah, blah is this. And you're like, well, that's not the answer we're looking for. And it would come on the day before you're due in court the next day to say to the judge, how well is Health Canada doing in handing over documentation? And you would get a big, big legal box and the day before trial, and you would read as much as you could, but ultimately we'd go to court and say, we haven't finished reading it because we got it yesterday, Your Honor. And he'd be like, all right, well, how about see you in 30 days? And then we'd be like, well, we're still reading it, but here's some more questions we have just from reading. And that process took about 6 to 8 months, even though we were looking for the pre-trial to go quickly. We were looking for documentation out of Health Canada. When they finally testified, we could pull out every document that we ever wanted from them. And that's what we ended up doing. We ended up getting several legal boxes of documentation of the wronggoing problems with the medical marijuana program. And currently, minister notes from the minister to the director of Health Canada on how the program should be run. Those were quite fascinating, including the one thing that we were looking at, and we're like, how is the Minister of International Affairs, what's he doing talking to Health Canada Director of Medical Marijuana Program? Minister International, well, what's going on here? So we decided to go down that rabbit hole, and what a mistake that was. You found out that the DEA had better access to the medical marijuana program than you. That's right, the Minister of International Affairs was setting up a meeting for Health Canada to meet the DEA. And he my lawyer Paul Lewin reads it, I read it, and he's like, you know, sometimes you think the hotheads are just smoking a lot of weed when they come up with crazy conspiracies, and they're just smoking weed, and you always knew it. You knew it. Well, there's the smoking gun. You're just like, let's just smoke it. It just hurts your head. When they're hiding these documents, they're hiding the document that people like to grow for themselves because it makes them feel better. They're hiding documentations that they met with the DEA. I mean, just the further we went down this enormous rabbit hole, the more scarier it becomes. You're just like, oh, we're messing with the man. So that was the pre-trial showdown, and literally we're looking for one, documentation. We weren't looking not to be found guilty or the pre-trial to send us onward. That happened quite easily. The judge just looked at me, he's like, yeah, there's enough evidence to find you guilty, which was true. So we did the pre-trial showdown. Health Canada hides behind the Rape Victim Act, and I think that's something that people need to remember, is the prohibitionists will use whatever it takes to do something, and in this case they hid behind the Rape Victim Act. And it just took forever to get these documentation from them. It's unbelievable the amount of documentation. You get like 3 boxes, and have to read it the night before. And by the night before, I mean at 5 o'clock in the evening it would arrive.